Hello! Today I'm going to be showing you how I make the patterns that I use when I make my armor. Apologize if I sound a little funny, I am still getting over a cold. In this video I'm just going to be covering the basic patterns that I have made before to do a full set of armor. So I'm not going to go into like a lot of detail. I wanted to do this separate from actually making armor pieces so that when I do a tutorial on how to make an armor piece, I don't have to go over the pattern every single time, going over the same pattern, because I reuse my patterns. So if I'm not making a new pattern, I can't show you the footage of me making the pattern. So it just complicates things. So when I do tutorials for armor, I'm going to start with my base piece made from the pattern. So I'm just going to show you how to draft your own patterns. And quick reminder, I'm not a professional. I've learned stuff from YouTube and Pinterest, and I've just pieced together my knowledge and do what works for me. So my techniques may not work for you. The basics are always the same. It's the finer details that are iffy, and that's really just because I make everything from scratch. Starting out with the bodice, I just wrap my dress form in plastic wrap. If you don't have a dress form, then you can do that on your torso. If you're able to do it on a dress form, I recommend it. It makes it a lot easier. Make sure if you're doing it on yourself though that you are wearing a t-shirt that you do not mind if you ruin, because you may ruin it when you go to cut the pattern off. After you're done wrapping it, just cover that in a layer of duct tape. And if you're doing this on your own torso, have someone else help you cover your back, because trust me, not fun. Once that's done, it should look something like this. And then I draw a line right up the center of the front and back. I do this for two reasons. One of them being that I always make my patterns in a left and right half, so there will always be a seam up the middle. Two being that when you're making the pattern, you can make two separate patterns out of one base. I'll draw the pattern out on half of the dress form, and I'll leave the other half. So I have my half a pattern. And then when I cut it out and I trace it onto the foam, what I do is I trace it one way, and then I flip the pattern over and I trace it the other. And I make sure I mark it which side is for the right side and which side's for the left side. Because if you don't mark it, you're going to get very, very confused. I'm showing you here the basic outline that I do for a bodice, a very standard bodice that I did for Lysandra's armor, Silva's ivy bodice. They're both the same basic pattern, and I like this bodice pattern best. If you don't want to do a bodice pattern, obviously don't draw a bodice pattern. You can find pictures online of how people lay out the seams on their armor. I haven't done a full chest plate in so long, I don't remember how to do it. Next time I go to make a full chest plate, I'll record the process of making the pattern as well, so that I can add that to the tutorial and show you guys how I do it. But right now, the one I'm most comfortable doing is the bodice. When you're drawing out the pattern, it's really up to you where you put the lines. The point of cutting it up is just so that it will lay flat when you're tracing it. Sorry, my head is in the way. I did not realize that my head was in the way. Just kind of draw out about where you feel like a good spot would be to cut so that each piece will lay flat. I just kind of made it up as I went along. Sometimes I'm better at it, sometimes I'm not. Some of my patterns have come out really bad and some of them have come out great. If a piece won't lay flat, or if you don't want it to be too small, you can see what I'm doing here is I made a line halfway through, so it just makes a slit and not a full cut. So when I put it on the foam, I just cut that part at a slight angle. So when I glue that little pie wedge together, it makes a nice curved spot. So if there's spots like that, if you cut out your pattern and there's spots that aren't laying flat, you can just cut a line in it and it will make it a little pie wedge. It's kind of just a cheat so that you have less pieces. This is the pattern that I use the most often. This is my basic bodice pattern. And as you can see, I label things as I see fit. Kind of want to lay your pieces out before you start. Take a picture of them so you know how it all fits together. Because when you're learning, I promise you, you will forget how it's supposed to fit together. Bracers are probably the easiest thing to make in my opinion. You start the same way as the bodice, just wrap yourself in plastic wrap and duct tape. When I do a bracer, I always draw the seam right up the middle, and I leave a little space because I don't really like them to come completely together in the middle. I like to have a little bit of a gap there. Once you've figured out where you want that to be, draw the basic shape that you want your bracer to be. I usually do the exact same shape on pretty much all of them. When you're done drawing that out, carefully cut it away from your arm. Make sure you're using scissors you don't really care about either, because when you're cutting duct tape, your scissors get a little gummy. Bracers are the only ones that I do not keep the original pattern of. I lay it on paper as flat as I can get it, and I trace it onto the paper because I like my bracer to be one piece. Basically, the foam kind of forms to your wrist anyway. You can use the original pattern, but you might have to make it two pieces and not one. I don't like gluing seams together, so I cheat and I make it one. Tessets are another one that's really easy. I'll hold up the paper to kind of get an idea of the size and sketch a basic outline where I want it to be, how wide I want it to be, and where I want it to end. Once you have that basic of where you want it to sit, you take your paper and you draw out the actual outline just flat on the table, cut it out, and you just hold it up to your hip again so that you can see where it lays and see if it's the right size. If it's not, cut more off if it's too small. Take a new piece of paper and try again making it bigger. Trace the original so that you know what is too small, and then mark where you wanted it to actually sit and draw the new outline. This is one of Valia's tessets. As you can see, freeze it for you. So as you can see, it's two pieces. It looks more complicated, but it's really just two of the exact same thing that have been pinned together at the top. I used the same technique to make them. They're just overlapping pieces. You make them the same way. Pauldrons are a pain in the butt to make. I am going to show you how to make the basic scale looking version of pauldrons, the ones that Azula wears. I feel like those are the easiest ones to make. The ones that are actually ones that hug the shape of your shoulder are so hard to make. I've made them for Imelda and then for Andrielle. And both times, the process of getting that pattern was not something that could have been recorded. As I'm figuring things out, eventually I'll have a tutorial on how to make the other kind of pauldron. So these are the easy versions of pauldrons. I just start by taping a piece of paper to the dress form about where I want it to sit, and then I draw out the basic shape that I want it to be. And you can see this is the pattern I used for Azula's. You can see how it sits, how it kind of steps down in size. What I do is I take my original pattern, I trace it, and then I take in the edges a little bit and I shorten it a little bit. And then I cut that out and I see how that lays and if it looks nice, and then I take that second one and I trace it and I take it in again, and then you have your third one, and then I trace the third one and I take it in, and then you have your fourth one, and I just do that stepping down so that it has a nice tapered look. You just want to make sure that your smallest one still covers as much of your arm as you want it to be. You don't need to take them in a whole lot. It's just a little bit. And usually with this type of pauldron, if you do make them all too big, once they're cut out of the foam and you start figuring out how you want to attach them together, it's pretty simple to cut the edges off. I recommend measuring how they're going to fit together before you actually paint them and fasten them together. Make sure they're fitting so that you can make them smaller if you need to. But you can see how they have that nice taper. They were all made from the same base pattern, just getting progressively smaller. Shin guards, basically you just start by wrapping your leg in plastic wrap and duct tape, just like everything else. We spend a lot of our lives wrapped up in duct tape. This one is a little different. So I recommend going up over your knee a little bit, as you see that is. You're not actually going to use that part of the pattern. I always cut my patterns off just below my kneecap because it's more, if you're putting on a separate knee part, it's more comfortable to have it cut off just below the kneecap, otherwise it just rubs on your kneecap when you're walking. I make EVA foam shin guards. I make them out of two separate pieces because you can see here, my leg isn't straight. I can't mirror my pattern and I can't make it one piece. So I use both sides of the pattern and I draw a line up the middle. As you see, I always have made the knee piece a separate piece. I think it's easier to do that than to add to the base of the shin guard, and I think it looks better. If you want it to be all one piece, then figure that out for yourself. I always make mine a minimum of 3 pieces: the left side, the right side, and the knee guard. Draw out your basic pattern. how much you want it to cover. And as you can see, I cut it off just below my knee because you're going to put a separate piece over your knee. What I did for Imelda and Lysandra is both a curving piece, and what I did for Velia is a straight piece, which was by far the easiest of the three. So there, you see how it does not lay flat? That's why it needs to be two pieces. This is Velia's shin guard with the very poorly disguised seam. And see how it curves up, that beautiful little arch that goes out over your foot. You can't get that if you use one piece. If you have like really bulky boots, you might want to wrap your leg with the boot on. I just make my straps a little bit longer to account for wearing a boot under them. Right here you can see that part cuts off right below my kneecap, just like the pattern showed. And the knee piece is just a single piece of foam riveted on top of it. The final stages of pattern making are a little bit less fun, of transferring those patterns to the EVA foam. So here you see I flip over my bodice patterns, do both sides. This is the right side and left side of one piece of the back plate of a bodice. It's just the same piece flipped over. When cutting, I just use an X-Acto knife. If you're cutting a straight edge, use a ruler, please, or it just won't be straight. Some edges, like the insides of parts that aren't fully cut through, need to be angled a little bit. I could not tell you which pieces need to be angled. You kind of just have to look at, how they're going to fit together, lay your pattern on the ground and see, kind of visualize. It's kind of trial and error, and it is very hard to mess up. It's usually fixable. I would say 9 times out of 10, a mistake with EVA foam is fixable, which is why I use EVA foam and not leather. When you've cut everything out, use a heat gun on it so you can lose the shape that the EVA foam originally had. I buy my EVA foam in like a big roll, so it has the shape, that rounded shape of the roll. So if I don't heat it so that it loses that shape, it's really, really hard to work with. Especially if I'm trying to get it to bend in a different direction, it puts a lot of strain on the seams, and it makes it much harder than it needs to be. You can't really see on the camera, but it does, the look of it changes. You can tell when it's done. Before it's heated, it looks very porous. When it's been heated, it looks more solid. And once you've heated it, you can shape it in the way that you actually want it to go, which makes it easier to glue together. And it's a little unnerving at first to pick it up right after it's been heated, but I promise, unless you've held the heat gun on it for like a really, really long time, you're not going to burn yourself. And just hold it until it's shaped. I use super glue to glue stuff together because I don't have a very well ventilated workspace. So if you don't either, I recommend using super glue and using some painter's tape to help hold your seams together so you don't have to just hold them there until they dry. If you do have a well ventilated workspace, please consider using contact cement for your seams. But if you don't have a ventilated space, don't do it. If you're using super glue though, you're probably gonna get it all over your hands, so be prepared for that. Once it's all glued together, heat it again, just in case you shaped stuff wrong. It gets everything, takes the strain off the seams and makes it so you can shape the final piece to fit you just right. Once you're done with that, I always put air dry foam clay on all the seams. I dip it in water so that it gets mushier. I don't know how else to put that. It spreads easier. It spreads really thin and really smoothly over everything. If you don't dip it in water, it doesn't stick as well. But I do this, first of all, to strengthen the seams. So I put it very liberally on every single seam. And I also do it so that if I'm not going to be covering the entire surface of the bodice, when I did Serafina's bodice, I knew I was going to be covering the entire thing with scales. It didn't matter what the base looked like. So I left all the seams very, very rough. They just look like that, except not wet. If you're going to be covering it, you don't have to worry about that. You just put it on for strength. If you are going to be using the base as the armor, like Lysandra's armor is the base armor. There's very little glued on top of it. It does not cover the entire base. So I had to sand all the seams so that they are very, very smooth. If you're strengthening them with air dry foam clay, make sure you wait to 24 hours before you sand it so it's completely dry. Otherwise, it'll just tear it off. And then you have to do it again. And then you have to wait 24 hours after that before you can sand it. So it's not worth it. Just do the waiting the first time. If you see there's gaps in my seams because I don't do things very well. So I will put foam clay all over the inside as well to fill in those gaps. And strengthen the seams more. Make sure if you do that you clear coat the inside of your armor, because otherwise, if you're wearing it and you're sweating, that foam clay will get like reactivated and it will get all over your shirt, and then you're gonna have to spend hours scrubbing it out of your shirt. I hope that this tutorial was helpful. Again, I'm not a professional by any means. I am definitely an amateur. I make stuff up as I go along, trial and error. If you don't feel comfortable doing that and figuring stuff out on your own, I recommend checking out this shop because they sell really amazing patterns for pretty much anything that you could want. They also have books on how to make EVA foam armor and stuff. I believe they have a book on like how to size up or size down patterns. So if their patterns don't fit you, you can change the sizes. I don't know if it's a book or if it's a video. They might have a video on it. They probably have a book too. Check out their shop. They have a lot of great things. And if you haven't before, check out their YouTube channel as well, because that's really amazing. But if you feel like just winging it, then I hope this was helpful for that. I will get a real tutorial on how I make the actual armor soon. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope this was helpful to you all. So I think I'm supposed to tell you to like and subscribe or else.